the Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance Committee to order. A quorum is present. Members, this is a really exciting day. We got a good opportunity to go ahead and get rolling and to work on issues important to the people of Minnesota. The first order of business today is going to be introductions, and we'll probably start with Steve, and then we'll make our way around the table and then talk to nonpartisan and partisan staff as introductions as we go on. So Representative Jacob, we'll start with you, and then, like I said, make our way down the table.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so my name, Representative Steve Jacob, District 20B, kind of down between Rochester and Winona. I'm a fourth-generation family farmer, continuing to farm out in the Whitewater State Park area to this day. So that's a little bit of background about myself.
Representative Warwas.
I'm Representative Cal Warwas. Very glad to be here. Freshman member. I represent the heart of the Iron Range. Dave Lizagard is my predecessor. I'm a third-generation miner, second-generation steelworker. Been working in mining for 28 and a half years. I continue with U.S. Steel to this day. Looking forward to what we can do for the state of Minnesota.
Representative Schultz.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Great to be with you. I'm Representative Isaac Schultz. I represent House District 10B in rural central Minnesota. I represent 5 counties there in a heavily agriculture community. And multiple generations have been there supporting the local economy. And I'm passionate about this issue area and excited to work on a lot of things to make our permitting system work better for more growth and development in our state and to help more Minnesotans have access to the outdoors. So excited for this committee, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Nathan Nelson. I serve District 11B. That's Pine and Kanabec and a little bit of Chisago County. And I've got a lot of agriculture in my area. I'm a farmer myself, third generation. And there's also a lot of sportsmen in my area, whether they're absentee landowners or people that come and use state and county land in the district. And so it's a big part of our local economy. And I think the natural resources fits well within my wheelhouse, and I'm glad to be here and talk about issues that are important to my district.
Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Chair Heinzman. Excited to serve along some new members here, and excited to see our folks across the aisle join us too here soon. So again, Don Gilman, and I serve the District 17A, which is an hour and 20 minutes west of the metro. Agriculture is the heartbeat of my district, and I love the outdoors. I live on a lake. I love all the things about our lakes, rivers, and streams, and just happy to be here. Happy to serve again in this committee. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Burkle.
Thank you, Chair Heinzman. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Representative John Burkle from District 1A, very northwest corner of the state. Roseau, Kitson, Marshall, Pennington counties. I'm a fourth-generation farmer as well. I'm looking forward especially, in particular, to, in my area, a lot of drainage issues, water, flood retention projects, that kind of stuff really matters. So the permit issues are really pertinent to my district, and I'm looking forward to address those.
Thank you. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Josh Heinzman. I represent the Brainerd Lakes area. I've served on the Environment Committee for about a decade, well, exactly a decade. This is my 11th year on the committee, so a great opportunity and honor to have the chance to work on these issues. Years ago, I started out as a watershed district manager in my county, Crow Wing, and kind of cut my teeth on issues relevant to a lot of the discussions we have here around water and land use. Also an avid sportsman. I am out frequently trying to find a crappie for my kids, which there's a number of them. There's 6. My wife Carrie and I have been married 25 years this last June, and there's always opportunities in my part of the state, very most central part of the state, the Brainerd Lakes area, as I mentioned, to hunt and fish and even have cuyuna nearby. So there's really a neat cross-section of issues that lands right there and gives me a unique opportunity to talk a lot about a lot of the discussions that are important to this committee and subject area. So that is me, and then I'll probably start on this side of the table, and Ms. Taylor.
I'm Janelle Taylor. I'm with Nonpartisan House Research. I cover the Environment and Natural Resources area as well as the Legacy Committee. I also mentioned that Bob Eliff in my office will also be staffing this committee. He's unfortunately double booked with energy, but he covers a portion of the PCA regarding the air permitting and solid waste issues.
Mr. Hagemeyer.
I'm Brad Hagemeyer with the Nonpartisan House Fiscal Analysis Department. I also cover the environment issues and then the legacy amendment as well. And I think this is my 13th session, started the 13th session here.
Mr. Yang.
Hello, I'm Shailong Yang. I am a CLA to Chair Heinzman, and I also have Rep. Gilman. Looking forward to working with you guys.
Ms. Bursey.
Thank you. I'm Erin Bursey. I'm your new Republican caucus researcher. Prior to this, I was working up in Benson, up in Detroit Lakes in Becker County and in Benson in Swift County. So I'm excited to work with you all.
And I threw you a curve, Ms. Zipko. I apologize, but Amy Zipko is going to be a very important part of this committee, and we're thankful that she's here to help us through today and the days going forward. So appreciate your help.
Thanks. Amy Zipko. I've been covering the Environment Committee now since 2011. Happy to be here.
All right. All right, very good. I'm going to go ahead and refer members to your folders. You have a copy of the draft committee rules in there. If you want to take a look at those, you'll notice the first item in those rules, and thank you. And I'll just mention a few that I think we should take a moment to discuss, and that's first of all, respect and decorum in this committee. We want to make sure we maintain those important elements of a hearing and maintain decorum at all times. We always strive to start on time, so I'm going to do my very best to always gavel in right at the appointed time, so be mindful of that. It is a bit of a walk. I decided to go outdoors today. That was challenging. Had a few icicles in my beard by the time I got here. I might not do that again if it's below zero. We'll see, but just a little bit different than what we've had as we were trying to get over here from the state office building versus the Centennial office building. Please email bill hearing requests to the committee administrator, Ms. Zipko, in case you think that it's one of the other members of the committee or other staff that would be incorrect. It's Ms. Zipko. There is a save packet in your folder, members. If you haven't had an opportunity to use that before, everything that's on the tables will be gone unless you put it in there, and you may want to keep it in that, for example, the committee rules potentially. That might be something you keep, for example. Otherwise, back to your office, I suppose, or it will be gone. The rules are not finalized as of yet, so if you have suggested edits, feel free to bring those up to myself or Ms. Zipko, and we could take a look at that and see if we may need to make an adjustment. So just wanted to cover that right out of the gate. And moving right along, I am going to turn this over to our excellent nonpartisan staff, and very grateful that Ms. Taylor and Mr. Hagemeyer are back again. Your work is always very much appreciated, and we're grateful for the opportunity to hear from both of you today. It's a good opening opportunity for the committee to get to know some of the accounts and the subject areas that we cover. and thought that that would be appropriate today. So, Ms. Taylor, if you would like to start, go ahead.
All right, Mr. Chair and members, I'm going to walk through the House research document entitled Environment, Natural Resources, Finance, and Policy Committee from January of 2025. And what this document does is it outlines the major entities that are typically within the jurisdiction of the committee. And it also lists some of the laws that govern the organization, authority, and responsibilities of those entities. It's not exhaustive. There are stuff elsewhere in statute, but these are typically the chapters of law that are deemed to be within the jurisdiction of the committee. So I'll start with the Department of Natural Resources, or DNR. The DNR is responsible for conserving and managing the state's natural resources and providing outdoor recreation opportunities. There are a number of issues that kind of fall within the DNR's world, but some of the ones that might come up before the committee are wildlife management. This would include hunting and fishing licenses, wildlife diseases like CWD, and then protecting threatened and endangered species. They're also responsible for natural resource and state land management. This would include issuing state land leases, also the timber, water use, and mining permits. They're also responsible for the regulation of recreational vehicles like ATVs and snowmobiles. And then they manage a number of units of the state's outdoor recreation system like the state parks, state trails, and WMAs. Then I've listed the relevant chapters of Minnesota statutes that sort of have a lot of the DNR's governing statutes. I'm not going to go through all of them because some of them we literally haven't touched in decades, but I'll point out some of the bigger ones. Chapter 84 is sort of the catch-all for the Department of Natural Resources. This has their organization as well as their general duties and then the management of the recreational vehicles. 84D is the invasive species statutes. Chapter 85, this one is about the parks and trails. This would be where you'd find all the state parks listed and the state trails that have been authorized. Chapter 86A is the outdoor recreation system. This will outline the purposes of those various units. Chapter 86B, this is the statutes that govern the use of boats. Chapters 88 through 90, these are the forestry and state forest related statutes. This also has the, Chapter 89A also has the Sustainable Forest Resources Act. Chapters 92 and 94 pertain to state lands. This would be where provisions regarding the sale and lease of state lands would be. Chapter 93, the mineral land statutes, this would be for leasing for state lands for purposes of mineral exploration. It also has the mine permitting. Chapters 97A through 97C are the game and fish statutes. 97A has the general overarching statutes. This would also include all the licensing fees. 97B would be the hunting statutes. 97C would be the fishing statutes. And then portions of Chapter 103F, protection of water resources, pertain to the DNR. This is where you would find the floodplain and shoreline management statutes. And then portions of Chapter 103G, the waters of the state statutes. This would be where you'd find DNR's water use permitting, their public waters work permits, and the public waters inventory. Then moving on to the PCA, the Pollution Control Agency. This is the agency that's responsible for protecting the environment, and this includes the implementation of federal laws such as the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Some of the issue areas that impact the PCA that the committee may deal with would be air monitoring and permitting, water quality monitoring, and then the water quality standards, industrial and municipal water permitting, such as wastewater, stormwater, and feedlots, the solid waste and hazardous waste management issues like recycling and landfill cleanup. And then regulation of tank storage facilities, as well as sometimes regulation of chemicals such as PFAS. There's a number of relevant statutes pertaining to the PCA. Some of the ones you maybe want to familiarize yourself with would be Chapter 114D. This is the Clean Water Legacy Act. Chapter 115, this is the water pollution control statutes. This is where a lot of the water pollution statutes would be, as well as septic system regulation. Chapter 115B, this is the Environmental Response and Liability Act, and it also has statutes relating to landfill cleanup program and others. And then Chapter 116, this is the pollution control sort of catch-all statutes. This is where the organization of the agency is, as well as some statutes regulating toxic chemicals. Then moving on to the Environmental Quality Board, the EQB. This is a board that's made up of several, or commissioners of several state agencies and some citizens appointed by the governor. Its main responsibility is for the environmental review program, including the environmental assessment worksheet rules and the environmental impact statement rules. It's also the entity that the legislature will sometimes task with issues that are cross-jurisdictional between the agencies, such as like silica sand. We did that several years ago. The relevant chapters of Minnesota statute for the EQB would be chapters 116C. This is the governing statutes for the board itself. And then chapter 116D, this is the environmental review statutes. Next is the Board of Water and Soil Resources, or BOWSR. This is a board made up of commissioners from various state agencies and then some governor-appointed citizens. The board typically works with local units of government and others to improve and protect the state's water and soil resources. Some of the issue areas that may come before the committee that pertain to BOWSR would be the Wetland Conservation Act, some soil and water conservation provisions such as the buffer requirements and the Reinvest in Minnesota program. They're also the oversight entity for the SWCDs, watershed districts, and watershed management organizations, and then their water management planning. Relevant chapters for BOWSR include Chapter 103B. This would include the organization of BOWSR as well as some of the water planning requirements. 103C is for SWCDs. 103D pertains to watershed districts, and then 103E is the state's drainage law. There's also some portions of Chapter 103F pertaining to BOWSR that would include the buffer requirements and the rim reserve program. And then they also have some portions of Chapter 103G, like the Wetland Conservation Act. That's where you'd find that. Then moving to the Metropolitan Council, the committee has a portion of the Metropolitan Council typically pertaining to regional parks and water resources. The relevant chapters of statute would be Chapter 473A. Then the Conservation Corps of Minnesota, this is a nonprofit organization that used to be part of the DNR. It provides youth and young adults with hands-on environmental stewardship and service learning opportunities, and they typically get a little bit of funding through this committee. Their relevant statute is Minnesota Statute Section 84.991. Next is the Minnesota Zoological Board. This is a board consisting of 30 members, and they maintain and operate the Minnesota Zoo. And the zoo typically receives some funding through this committee, and its relevant chapter is Chapter 85A. Next is the Science Museum of Minnesota. This is another nonprofit organization, and its stated mission is to turn on the science, inspire learning, inform policy, and improve lives. The museum typically receives some state funding as part of the committee's budget. Then the next entity is the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, or LCCMR. And this is a 17-member commission made up of citizens and legislators. It is tasked with making funding recommendations for the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. This is the constitutionally dedicated fund funded by proceeds from the state lottery. And the relevant chapters for the LCCMR would be chapters 116P. This would be the trust fund statute as well as the organization of the LCCMR. And then chapter 116Q, this is the Great Lakes Protection Fund, a small fund that they are also tasked with making recommendations for. And then I've listed a number of other chapters of statute that are relevant to the committee and often show up on jurisdictional lists. I'm not going to go through all of these because, again, some of these we don't really deal with much, but Chapter 103A is the overarching water policy for the state. Chapter 103H is the Groundwater Protection Act. This has some duties for a number of different agencies in the state. And I think that's about all. Mr. Chair, if there's questions, or I can turn it over to Mr. Hagemeyer.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Members, if you have any questions, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Taylor. When looking at a lot of the chapters, I'm seeing that there's a lot of, well, especially in Chapter 103, F and G, that those are both covered by Bowser and the DNR. Is it commonly found that those are ever in conflict with one another on whose responsibility is which, or is it just very much subdivided beneath that?
Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chair, Representative Schultz, there are a number of statutes where there, chapters a lot where there's different agency responsibilities. Generally, it's usually clear who's responsible for what. It's just where they've been coded in statute. But, there are times when there are conflicts, and hopefully those are resolved.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Hagemeyer.
Mr. Chair, I'll go through a document entitled Environment and Natural Resources Finance, dated January 16th of 2025. I won't read this word for word here, but you can see I listed the entities funded. I think Ms. Taylor talked about all of these, so if there isn't a question on any of those, I will go on to the next area. There's three different, for those members that haven't been here, are new to this, there's three different appropriation types that we deal with. There are direct appropriations. That's for a specific amount of money used during a specific period of time. Our omnibus bills you see are typically almost always direct appropriations. There might be some statutory changes that cause funding shift, but the appropriations you see in the session law will be direct appropriations. Typically they're for 1 year, but they could be made available for the biennium or an extended period of time. It'll list an end date in the bill if it's an extended period of time. We do not leave direct appropriations until spent. Causes different issues. There's statutory or standing appropriations. These are made in the statutes instead of session laws. It's authorizing an ongoing payment out of the Treasury for a program. Unlike the direct appropriations, these do not need to be renewed every 2 years. They would just continue ongoing if, even if a session law bill is not passed, an omnibus funding bill is not passed. And then the last type is an open appropriation. It's kind of a subset of a statutory appropriation. An open appropriation is where the level of funding necessary to fulfill an obligation is made available in the fiscal year. So you'd have a lot of non-general fund things that might fall in this, but in the environment area, there's just a couple of open general fund appropriations. That's for firefighting and the treaty payments, and then a small piece for the Concon lands in Marshall County. After that, we can go to the different funds that are talked about in this committee, or most of them anyways. And then all the values here are based on the November of 2024 forecast, unless you see something else written there. The general fund, which is the main funding source used by the state, our least restrictive funding source, and like when you'll hear about committee targets and budget, it typically refers to the general fund amount. The funding for the 24-25 biennium was $1,030 million. For the entities included here in the Finance Committee. The base for the 26-27 biennium, which is the years that we're upcoming now, or the budget bills we'll be working on now are for the 2026-27 biennium. The base is $423 million. And then I should just note that that figure does not include the PILT payments, and that's almost $100 million for the biennium. Those are carried in the tax bill. Capital investment, the bonding bills, the bills sometimes come through this committee, sometimes they don't, but they do go to the agencies involved with this committee. In 2023, during the bonding bill, there's $316 million in bonding passed, and then an additional $63 million in general fund cash that went to the entities funded here. Should note a bunch of those are pass-through funding to local units of government through the DNR and through the PCA, but it can go for a variety of purposes, such as acquisition and development of parks and trails, asset preservation, facility development, rim acquisition easement, the local road wetland replacement program, dam removal, repair, and reconstruction, things of that nature. The next funding source you see listed is the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. This is sometimes a separate bill, sometimes included in an omnibus finance bill. It's created in Article 11, Section 14 of the Constitution, and then all assets of the fund shall be appropriated by law for the public purpose of protection, conservation, preservation, and enhancement of the state's air, water, land, fish and wildlife and other natural resources. It's credited with 40% of the net proceeds of state lotteries. This is the one that was just on the ballot in November of this year to extend it through the year 2050. The Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources makes annual recommendations to the legislature that appropriates up to 5.5% of the corpus of the fund. For FY26, the upcoming year, they have made recommendations. I don't know if it's at the legislature yet, but the upcoming recommendations are for $103.3 million and include 124 projects. And then in addition to those recommendations, starting in FY26, an additional 1.5%, which equates to $28 million, will be available to appropriate to the newly created community grant program run through the DNR. Turning to the next page is the Game and Fish Fund. And it's made up of a number of different accounts. Some of the accounts are directly appropriated, some are statutorily appropriated, and they vary in size quite a bit. There's the Game and Fish Operations account. That one is dealt with direct appropriations in the session law bills quite frequently. And then there's a bunch of dedicated accounts. I can name some of them: the Deer Bear Management account, the Emergency Deer Feeding account, the Deer Habitat Improvement account, the Waterfowl account, Trout and Salmon account, the Pheasant Habitat Improvement account, the Wild Rice account, Wildlife Acquisition account, the Wild Turkey Management, the Walleye Stamp, and the Wolf Management and Monitoring account. A lot of those are statutorily appropriated and comes from the fees based on the stamps that you buy or the permits that you buy. Then there's the Heritage Enhancement account, and this is one of the lottery in lieu of sales tax accounts that most of them are in the Natural Resources Fund. I'll list them there. But these receive a portion of what would otherwise be the revenue of sales tax on lottery tickets. And this fund is directly appropriated in the bills typically. There's a lifetime license trust fund is included in the Game and Fish Fund, and that's where if you buy a lifetime hunting or fishing license, the funds go into that account. And then there's a peace officer training account. And then expenditures from the Game and Fish Operations account are used to manage, monitor, and protect fish and wildlife resources, enforce game and fish laws, provide access to lakes, rivers, streams, and deliver administrative support across the programs. All the dedicated accounts, the expenditures are directly related to the purpose for which the account's established and the fee is collected. Expenditures from the Heritage Enhancement account are used to improve, enhance, or protect fish and wildlife resources. The primary revenues into the Game and Fish Fund are mostly from departmental earnings, which is license fees, and that's about $67 million in the last fiscal year. And then through the federal grants through the Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson funds, which are federal excise tax on hunting and fishing and goods. And that's about $46 million for FY24. And then the Heritage Enhancement account received $17.6 million in fiscal year 24. Total expenditures out of the Game and Fish Fund are approximately $133 million in FY24. Going next is the Natural Resources Fund. Again, this is mostly spent through the DNR. There's 22 accounts within the Natural Resources Fund. All the recreational vehicle accounts, so the watercraft, snowmobiles, ATVs, off-highway motorcycles, and off-road vehicles. There's a state parks account. That's from the fees and passes. And then there's the lottery in lieu accounts that I just mentioned. There's a state parks and trails lottery in lieu, a metro regional parks lottery in lieu, a local trail grants lottery in lieu account, a zoo grants account, regional parks and trails, and then an outdoor recreation opportunities for underserved communities. So these also all receive a part of that lottery in lieu funds. They each get a different percentage, and then these are typically dealt with directly in the bill, and they're typically in each biennium, there are some changes made in those funding sources based on the revenues available in the account. There's also accounts for non-game wildlife, invasive species, forest management, minerals management, mining administration, cross-country skiing, land acquisition, the state land and water conservation fund, the water management account, and then there's a bunch of natural resources dedicated. They're kind of like an appropriation that's kind of show up as an account within there, within the fund though as well. Expenditures from the Natural Resources Fund are used for the programs and purposes of how the funds are generated. The in lieu of tax receipts for the lottery tickets go to the various programs that I already mentioned. The zoo ones go to the Minnesota Zoo, the Duluth Zoo, and the Como Zoo. Then there's also some direct appropriations from the Natural Resource Fund to the Metropolitan Council for the regional park system. The primary revenues from into the Natural Resources Fund are about 74.4 million from departmental earnings, and then the in lieu revenues are 22 million. And then there's unrefunded gas tax, which goes to those dedicated ATV, snowmobile, off-highway motorcycle, all those get a portion of the gas tax that go into them, and those are about 20 million in fiscal year 24. In total, fiscal year 24 expenditures were 137.6 million. Next is the environmental fund. This is used through PCA. It's kind of the primary funding stream into PCA. It's used to collect environmentally related taxes and fees. Those in FY24, the main revenue source into there is a solid waste management tax. It receives a percentage of that at 70%, and then that equated to $85 million, and then there's $11.2 million from the motor vehicle transfer fee. These are the two non-dedicated revenue sources into the fund that can be spent on different purposes. All the other fees going into there are program-related fees, so you'll see like $17.8 million for air permit fees, hazardous waste fees are $7 million, water quality fees are $4.4 million, and pollution prevention fees are $2.8 million, and those go back to the program and purpose for which they're collected. So total expenditures out of the fund were 93 million in FY24, and then additionally, there's a $24 million, it should be 24 million per year is transferred to the remediation fund. And that brings us to the remediation fund. The purpose of the fund is for responsive and corrective actions to address releases of hazardous substances, pollutants, and contaminants, agricultural, chemicals, petroleum, and work on qualified landfill facilities. The primary revenue source is the transfer from the environmental fund, and then a transfer from the Petro Fund, the Petroleum Tank Release Cleanup Fund. That's 14.8 million. Total expenditures in 24 were just under 40 million. If you look at the consolidated fund statement, you'll see the balance looks much different than that. That's because within the remediation fund, there's the 3M grant account, and this all relates to the 2018 settlement with 3M related to PFAS. So it was for $850 million. 725 came into the state, and then is held in a dedicated account. Can only be spent in the East Metro area for cleanup activities and the work related to that. If you turn to the next page, is the Closed Landfill Investment Fund. It was created in 1999. There was some general fund appropriations for 4 years that went in there. It was invested, and then it could only be spent after fiscal year 2020. There's currently 112 landfills in the program, and then expenditures started in FY22. There's right now a statutory appropriation that ends after this fiscal year. So I'd anticipate you'll see some, or we do see some changes in the governor's budget relating to allowable expenditures out of this. In total, the annual appropriation for these 4 years was 4.5 million per year, and then there's an additional 9 million available if some emergency conditions were met. And then as of December 31st of 2024, the invested balance is just under 160 million. And then federal funds, you'll see these show up on our spreadsheets as well. Agencies receive grants and work agreements with the federal government. Typically, the legislature doesn't intervene with these. They do show up in the budget pages, and they do come through the LAC budget process, so there's like a 20-day review process for these federal expenditures to happen if there are any objections. And FY24 is just under $63 million. All agencies use most agencies use a special revenue fund as well. I think the environment area uses them a little bit differently because we have the dedicated funds for game fish, natural resources, and things where typically those might go through the special revenue fund. But some other fees and expenditures work through there. A lot of it in this area, though, is work agreements for agencies between the agencies and internal billing in some of the agencies. They're typically statutorily appropriated. In 24, it ends up being like just under $260 million. There's the gift fund. There's a couple agencies use this. Most of the gift fund is actually in the environment area, and the DNR and zoo typically account for most of that. But the PCA does have a bunch of that showing up in the fund statement right now because the Volkswagen settlement a few years ago is run through the gift fund as well. So in total, FY24 expenditures were 25 million. There's the RIM fund. It's the Reinvest in Minnesota Resources. It's used for the collection and expenditure of donations to the RIM program through the sale of the critical habitat license plates and other donations. In FY24, the expenditures were 8 million. Next is a permanent school fund. It's primarily expended on education, however, which is just under 51 million in FY24. The revenues come from the sale of from mining royalties and timber harvest. In FY24, that was just under 33 million. The legislature does make some direct appropriations from the money prior to it getting into the permanent school fund. In FY24, that was $440,000. And then the DNR is also able to recover costs from work on school trust lands, like setting up the timber sales, basically. And that amounted to $7.2 million being deposited in that to resources fund, and then 1.4 in the general fund. Then getting on to the last couple, the Clean Water Revolving Fund is primarily expended as loans through the Public Facilities Authority, but PCA does receive some funding for its work related to this too. In FY24, that was 2.4 million. And then at the end, you'll see the constitutionally dedicated legacy funds. In the last handful of years, they have not come through this committee at all. They just go straight to the legacy committee, any bills related to this. However, most of the funding does go to the agencies within this committee jurisdiction. And in FY25, that was about, the appropriations totaled $452 million. That's all I have on the accounts and funds. If there's any questions, I can try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Hagemeyer. And members, I'll just quickly mention before we go to questions that this committee is responsible for so many funds as we've just learned about today. We wanted to go through each of those and just give the public and the members of the committee an opportunity to hear what exactly all those were. So that's very much appreciated, and I'm glad we took the time. Members, any questions? Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Chair Heinzman. So, Mr. Hagemeyer, I was just curious about when did the Volkswagen, I don't know about the Volkswagen settlement agreement. 47 million comes into the state over 10 years. So just wondered, when did that start, and when is that coming to an end?
Mr. Hagemeyer.
I don't know if you know about that, so.
It was, I don't remember the exact year. I'm looking at Ms. Taylor here, maybe like at least 5 years ago started. It was through a federal settlement with Volkswagen related to emissions. I don't know how much the state was actually involved in settling that, but the portion that comes to Minnesota is 47 million. And then it was just run through the gift fund. I don't remember exactly what year, but I can certainly try to find when that runs through for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Heinzman. So on the Natural Resources Fund, it states that there's 22 accounts, and I'm only seeing about 13 of them there. So I'm interested in all the accounts and how the money breaks down. If that's something you could maybe get to me at another time, I'd like to know the answer to that. Unless you happen to have that off the top of your head.
Mr. Hagemeyer.
Mr. Chair, I think there might be 13 bullet points there, but some of those have a number of accounts within them, like recreational vehicle accounts has the watercraft account, the snowmobile account.
Yeah, I tried to do the math and I couldn't come up with 22, a number of different ways of including those. I saw cross-country skiing in there and I was surprised that there was an account for cross-country skiing, so that led me to wonder how these funds are actually distributed.
Mr. Hagemeyer, I don't know if there's a question there.
I can list and try to count to 22 while I'm listing them if you'd like.
Mr. Hagemeyer, I think we're good.
Okay.
Representative Schultz, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Hagemeyer. During the previous legislative session, a great deal of money was put into these, all of these accounts within the purview of this committee. Based upon the budget forecast and additional information, do we already know, based upon the November or December budget forecast, what the approximate amount of money is remaining within each of these accounts at this point, or are we still waiting on that information?
Mr. Hagemeyer.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I think you said a number of things were put into the accounts. I think you mean expenditures out of the accounts. There were probably some revenue changes too that added revenues to some of the accounts. I have estimates that I'm using for budget based on the November forecast, but the bills this year will be based on the February forecast. So those aren't out yet till the end of February, beginning of March, that becomes available. There's a lot of accounts here. I wouldn't say there's one answer that they're all in great shape or all in bad shape or anything like that. It all depends on the time horizon you're looking at and what all needs to happen. A lot of the changes that were made were also one time the last time around, kind of spending balances that were in the accounts, but it doesn't mean that continues, so.
Representative Gilman, our crack team here has ascertained that the Volkswagen settlement was 2017. So if you want to do some more checking on that, that would be the timeline. Any more questions, members? All right, hearing none. I really appreciate Ms. Taylor, Mr. Hagemer. Thank you for coming in and going through those. They can be really confusing, and I appreciate the time that we were able to spend on that. Members, I'm just going to quickly give you a little bit of a roadmap. Next Thursday, we are going to hear the permitting bill that we've been talking about. So for the public and for those in attendance today, just be watching for that. That's House File 8. This committee is going to be working very hard right out of the gate. We would have liked to have some more discussion today, but I'll just say that going forward, we're hoping that a number of agencies that are in the purview of this committee will be sending folks over. We'd like to maybe have an overview from MPCA and DNR. We haven't had that for a long time, and it would be nice to get some more detail from the commissioners in each of those subject areas. Also from Bowser. I'll just quickly mention that the attention of this committee will be shifting slightly from what it has been in years past. There's going to be a broader conversation relative to issues that sportsmen and women around the state would generally expect to see and hear heard in this committee. In addition to that, I think that you'll find that job creators have more opportunity to speak to a lot of issues that are important and relevant to their efforts to support Minnesota families and to create more opportunities and more occupations, more jobs in Minnesota. And you'll see less regulatory mandates and such coming from this committee, and an effort to address concerns and issues that may have arisen over the course of the last 6 years. So I will leave that there, and we will adjourn for today. We are adjourned.